My name is Paige Afton. I'm 32 years old. Last Thursday, my father called me for the first time in almost 2 years. Not to apologize, not to ask how I'd been. He called because he needed something signed before noon. I almost didn't answer. The number still said Dad because I never changed it, which is stupid probably, but there are some things you leave untouched out of laziness, and some because changing them would make everything feel too real. I answered on the fourth ring. Paige? Just that, like we'd spoken last week. In the background, I could hear a television and my mother asking somebody where the aluminum foil was. Normal house sounds. That weirdly hurt more than if he'd been dramatic. Hey, I said. A pause. Then, you get the paperwork? Not even how are you? I looked at the envelope sitting unopened on my kitchen counter beside a bowl of oranges Daniel kept forgetting to eat. Yeah. We're trying to move quickly on this. Of course they were. My father always sounded calmer when he wanted control of something. I asked what exactly he thought he'd sent me. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. The lake house, he said carefully. The attorney explained it. No, the attorney explained signatures and property transfer forms. What he did not explain was why my parents, who spent 2 Christmases pretending I didn't exist, suddenly remembered I was family the second money got involved. I opened the envelope while he stayed on the line. Quick claim deed, transfer of interest, standard language. At the bottom was a highlighted line waiting for my signature. My father cleared his throat. We already have a buyer. There it was. Not, we miss you. Not, your mother's been worried. Just, we already have a buyer. I started laughing. Not politely either. Full, exhausted laughter. The kind that slips out when something finally becomes too ridiculous to carry seriously anymore. My father got quiet. Paige? I covered my eyes with one hand, because suddenly I was 20 again, standing in our kitchen while my mother told relatives I was independent, which always sounded complimentary until you realized independent in our family meant the child you don't have to love out loud. I'll look at it, I said eventually. Then I hung up before he could say anything else. Daniel found me 10 minutes later, still standing there with the paperwork in my hand. You okay? I shrugged. Depends how you define okay. He read my face for a second, then the envelope. Oh. Yeah. Oh. Daniel didn't ask if I wanted to call them back. He knew better by then. We'd been married 4 years. He'd seen enough. He just opened the fridge, stared into it for a while like the milk might suddenly offer emotional guidance, then asked, You eat yet? Which was one of the reasons I loved him, not because he always knew what to say, because he usually didn't pretend to. I grew up outside Knoxville, in a town where people said, Bless your heart, with the emotional precision of a knife. My father managed the local bank. My mother organized church events and corrected people's grammar in public. My younger sister Meredith cried easily and never had to finish consequences. That's the shortest possible explanation of my family. Meredith was what people call sensitive. I was mature. Sensitive children get protected. Mature children get handed responsibilities and praised for not needing anything. By 14, I was packing my own lunches, working weekends at a diner, and listening to my parents explain why Meredith needed more support than I did. She needed piano lessons because she was artistic. I needed a job because I was practical. Even now I can hear my father saying, You're stronger than your sister. For years I thought that was love. Then one day you realize being the strong one mostly means nobody checks if you're bleeding. The only person who ever noticed things without me explaining them was my grandfather Howard. He never made speeches about fairness. He'd just quietly do things. Slip me $20 for textbooks. Show up to school plays even when my parents forgot. Teach me how to patch drywall. Once, when I was 16, Meredith got a car for her birthday, and I got a hug and a store-brand cake. I remember standing in the driveway, smiling so hard my cheeks hurt, while Meredith screamed over a Jeep with a red bow on it. That night, Grandpa Howard knocked on my bedroom door. He handed me a tackle box. Inside was cash. Not enough for a car, enough for options. "I know it ain't the same," he said. Then he scratched his chin and added, "Your daddy gets tunnel vision." That was all. No lecture. No guilt. Just truth. I met Daniel at 26 because the lights in our office building kept flickering. He was rewiring the third floor. I remember hearing someone singing Johnny Cash terribly off-key in the hallway and thinking, either this man is very confident or deeply unemployed. Turned out he was an electrician. Tall, worn boots, permanent grease stain on one sleeve. The kind of face that looked serious until he smiled. On our third date, he brought me flowers from a gas station because every real florist was closed. He apologized for them 3 separate times. I married him partly because he never tried to sound impressive. My father hated that immediately. Not loudly at first. My father preferred surgical disappointment. At dinner one night, he asked Daniel, "So when do you plan on doing something more stable?" Daniel blinked. "Electricity's been pretty consistent so far." I almost laughed into my mashed potatoes. My father didn't. The Christmas everything finally broke felt normal right up until it didn't. 15 people in the house, ham in the oven, football on TV, my Aunt Linda already tipsy enough to start calling everyone honey. Meredith cornered me in the kitchen while I was cutting pie. She needed money again. $5,000. Something about inventory, a boutique, online sales. I honestly stopped listening halfway through because I'd heard versions of this speech for years. I said no. Not dramatically, just no. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then she started crying almost instantly, which honestly was impressive. By the time we walked back into the living room, she already looked devastated. My father muted the television. "What happened?" "I just asked for help," Meredith whispered. That was it. That was all she had to say. My father looked at me with this exhausted disappointment, like I'd failed a moral test. "Family helps family, Paige." I remember everyone suddenly becoming very interested in their drinks. Nobody likes moments where they might accidentally need courage. "I've helped her for years," I said. My mother jumped in immediately. "Don't keep score." Easy thing to say when you're not the one being drained. Daniel was standing near the hallway by then, quiet, watching. My father kept going. "You've changed since you got married." There are sentences families use when they want to punish you for becoming harder to control. That's one of them. Then my mother, smiling, actually smiling, leaned toward Aunt Linda and said, "I worry about Paige sometimes. She gets fixated." Fixated, like I was unstable for finally saying no. The room got hot all at once. I put the pie server down carefully because suddenly I had this ridiculous urge to throw it. Instead, I grabbed my coat. Nobody stopped me. That's the part I remembered later. Not one person said, "Hey, maybe don't leave upset." Daniel already had the keys in his hand before I reached the front door. Outside, it was freezing. I got into the truck and shut the door hard enough to rattle the windows. For about 10 minutes, neither of us spoke. Then I said, "Did I overreact?" Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "No," he said. Then, after a second, "But they're gonna tell everyone you did." And he was right. Small towns are ecosystems. Information spreads there like smoke. By February, people were treating me carefully. Too carefully. An old friend asked if I was doing better. My cousin Rachel finally admitted my mother had been telling people I was emotionally unstable, that Daniel isolated me, that marriage changed my personality. I asked Rachel if she believed that. She hesitated, which honestly hurt worse than if she'd just said yes. We moved 45 minutes away that spring. Not far enough to erase people, far enough to breathe. Daniel's business grew. I got promoted. We bought a small house with crooked floors and a porch swing that squeaked every time you moved too fast. At night, things got quiet enough for old thoughts to get loud. Sometimes I'd wonder if I should call my parents. Sometimes I'd get angry they weren't wondering the same thing. Sometimes I missed my mother so much I'd nearly pick up the phone out of reflex. Then I'd remember Christmas, or graduation, or every time Meredith exploded her life and somehow I became responsible for cleaning it up. People think estrangement feels dramatic. Mostly, it feels repetitive, like reopening the same bruise every few weeks just to check if it still hurts. It always does, just differently. 3 days after my father called, I drove to the attorney's office. Rain the whole way there. The building smelled like old carpet and coffee. My father was already inside the conference room when I walked in. Pressed blue shirt, perfect posture, reading glasses low on his nose. For one stupid second, my chest tightened because he still looked like my dad. Then he looked up and said, "Glad you came." And the feeling disappeared again. The lawyer started explaining the paperwork. Property transfer, interested parties, sale agreement. My father interrupted twice to hurry him along. Finally, the lawyer slid the papers toward me. "Once this is signed—" "It's not getting signed," I said. My father exhaled slowly through his nose. "Paige." Not angry yet, just warning me. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. The trust documents landed softly on the table. The lawyer frowned immediately. He picked them up, started reading, then rereading. My father shifted in his chair. "What is that?" Nobody answered him for a few seconds, and in that silence I watched something happen that I'd never seen before. My father got nervous. Actually, nervous. The lawyer removed his glasses. "Mr. Afton," he said carefully, "were you aware this property was transferred into trust ownership before Howard Afton's death?" My father stared at him blankly. "No." The lawyer looked back at the paperwork, then at me, then back at my father. "This house does not legally belong to you." I swear the room changed temperature. My father laughed once under his breath, like the sentence itself was stupid. "That's impossible." "It isn't." He grabbed the papers from the lawyer so fast a page bent. I watched him read the trust twice. His hands started shaking slightly around the edges. And suddenly, I remembered being little and thinking adults always knew what they were doing. What a terrifying lie that is. Turns out Meredith's boutique was drowning in debt. My parents refinanced their house trying to save it. The lake house sale was supposed to fix everything, and apparently my father had already assured everyone I'd cooperate because Paige always caves eventually. That part came out by accident. Meredith called during the meeting, speaker volume too loud. "Did she sign it yet?" My father looked like he wanted to throw the phone through drywall. The lawyer pretended not to hear, which somehow made it worse. Then came the part I still think about sometimes. Not the yelling, not the trust, not even the panic. My father sat down heavily and said very quietly, "If this sale falls through, your mother could lose the house." Not we, your mother. Even then he was trying to carry the image of protector. And for one awful second, I almost gave in. That's the thing nobody tells you about family patterns. Even after years away from them, your body still remembers the choreography. Fix it, calm things down, make yourself smaller, save everybody. I looked down at my hands because I could actually feel myself starting to fold. Then I remembered being 22 years old, taking graduation photos alone because Meredith needed help moving furniture. Something inside me hardened again. "I'm not selling Grandpa's house," I said. My father rubbed both hands over his face. Old man exhaustion suddenly replacing authority. When did you get so cold? That one landed. I won't lie. Because children raised on conditional love carry permanent guilt once they finally stop performing. I almost answered. Instead, I asked, when did you stop seeing me? That shut the room down completely. Even the lawyer stopped moving. My father opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the table, and there it was, the real answer. Not cruelty, not hatred, just years of choosing the easier child until it became habit. Honestly, that hurt more. After the meeting, I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes with the windshield wipers running. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired in a bone-deep way, like I'd finally put down something heavy and now my arms didn't know what to do. Daniel texted, "How bad?" I stared at the screen a while before answering, weirdly sad. He replied almost immediately, "Want tacos?" I laughed so suddenly the woman parked beside me glanced over. And maybe that sounds small, but sometimes love is just someone offering tacos instead of forcing you to explain grief before you're ready. My parents tried staying at the lake house after the meeting. That whole situation got messy fast. My mother started posting old family photos online with captions about protecting family legacy. Meredith uploaded selfies from the dock like she was campaigning for sympathy. One cousin messaged me, "Honestly, this feels unnecessary on both sides." Which is what people say when one person punches another and they're uncomfortable choosing who's bleeding. Eventually, the attorney threatened trespassing paperwork. They left 2 days later. My mother cleaned the kitchen before she went. That detail destroyed me for some reason. Petty people still wipe countertops. Human beings are inconveniently complicated. A week later, I drove to the lake house alone. The dock sagged more than I remembered. Inside smelled like cedar and old rain. There was a note on the kitchen table in my father's handwriting. Just one sentence. This was never supposed to happen. I stood there reading it over and over. No apology, no accountability, but not anger either. Just confusion. Like he genuinely didn't understand how years of small betrayals eventually become a door closing. I folded the note and put it in my pocket anyway. I still have it. I don't fully know why. Daniel and I started fixing the place up slowly after that. Nothing dramatic. New porch screens, fresh stain on the dock, wiring repairs. One afternoon, I found an old photograph shoved inside a toolbox. Me, at 6 years old, holding a fish with this furious, determined expression because it kept slipping out of my hands. Grandpa Howard behind me, laughing so hard his eyes disappeared. I sat on the garage floor looking at that picture a while, then finally understood something I probably should have realized years earlier. The house was never really the point, neither was the money. My grandfather left me proof. Proof that at least one person saw exactly what was happening long before I did. And maybe that's why I cried harder over the trust papers than I ever would have cried over the property itself. Because being protected after years of being emotionally overlooked feels almost unbearable at first. Like sunlight hitting eyes that got used to dim rooms. I still haven't fully reconciled with my parents. Some people expect a cleaner ending than that. Life usually doesn't give one. My mother sends occasional texts now, mostly practical things. Recipes, weather warnings, updates about distant relatives I barely remember. My father sent me a photo last month of the old fishing boat after he repaired the motor. No caption, just the picture. I stared at it for a long time before replying, "Looks good." That was the whole conversation. Maybe that sounds sad. Maybe it is. But not every family heals in a cinematic speech. Sometimes healing looks like people slowly learning how to speak again without pretending the past never happened. And sometimes they never learn at all. I don't know yet which version will